Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing today? And welcome back to another Common Sense Guys show. And yes, my camera is not on at the minute, but kablah! There it is. It's back on. How are you all doing today? We are going to be doing a little bit of a live show very shortly. Well, we are, but I am going to be having somebody else on. It is going to be Memes of the Destruction again. We are doing this thing called News Quest, as well as doing what this segment should be called, which is In My Opinion. In other words, having a look at these types of stories, letting people know that we are putting our opinions down onto this and making sure that everybody knows that it's our opinions, that we're basing this on our story. And yes, I can see that the video is going really choppy at the minute. So I'm actually going to get rid of the video, try and keep things a little bit better, hopefully. Let me know if the voice recording is going okay, so to speak, and it's not just blopping around everywhere at the moment. But yes, we've got a couple of decent stories today. One of the stories that we're going to be doing and covering today is going to be about the Boston and Washington emancipation statue. So the actual statue that has Lincoln standing over a slave, a freed slave at this point in time, with shackles being broken, as in he's standing up from the shackles being broken, that he breaks himself, and how certain groups actually feel about that story and how they feel about everything, and the fact that we have a descendant from the actual original slave that it was based on, saying that he wants it to be kept the same way because it was how it was meant to be, so to speak. Also have a black woman on as well that is a historian or a local historian that also says along the same lines of why it was there and the reason why it was put in and why they should keep it the way it is rather than it being pulled down. And to begin with, though, we are going to talk about good old Prince Andrew. Yes, the Duke himself. Because obviously we know that there's a particular wife of somebody called Espatine, or Espatine. I believe that's what it was called. Not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, apparently she's been seen in certain pictures with a certain girl that was claiming that Prince Andrew knew at a specific point in time that she was underage when being a little bit touchy-feely with her. Yeah. But we'll get into that and find out what's going on with the lawyers and things like that with Prince Andrew, shall we? So let's get into that while I'm waiting for my friend and colleague to come in. But we are going to talk about Prince Andrew to begin with. We are going to go deep into the statues as well. As I said before, we are going to be looking at the idea of people that are activists, black activists, that want the statue to be kept the same way, ancestor of the actual original slave that this was put onto as well, as in what it was molded after, as well as the same person, weirdly enough, being a cousin to Muhammad Ali. So it's not like he already has some heritage or anything, but we'll get into that at another point. But let's talk about Prince Andrew and the lawyers that are denying the claims he is deliberately evading authorities investigating Espatine. So the royal legal team tells Sky News he has offered his assistance a number of times, but this is disputed by lawyers in the US. Funny that, isn't it? Funny that. So, in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, if you can, please, press 1 if you want me to show you this video so that we can all hear it. That way we can have a listen to see how Sky News has decided to report on this to begin with. That way I know what you guys think. So whoever is actually left in chat, because there was some people that were here, then they went away. But even if it's just you, Mr. Quinn, or even if it's just anybody, just press a 1. Let me know if you want to watch this video about what's going on with Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein, or Espetan. I'm deliberately mispronouncing his name because of YouTube, just so people don't try getting on me. Just so that they don't get on me. As there doesn't seem to be any sort of interaction at the minute, which is absolutely fine. It's still early, I suppose. I will play this video so people that are watching it later can watch the video with us. So let's watch this video, shall we? I wonder if there's going to be an advert. I bet you there's going to be an advert, because there always is an advert. Always is. Including one for Richard Branson, which is always nice.
What's your reaction to Prince Andrew's statement on US authorities?
His bewilderment is subsidiary to my bewilderment, because he's been personally invited to provide all the information he knows for more than a decade. I know personally, for over a decade, we've been asking him to come and provide all of the information that he has. I think I personally invited him at least 3 times to tell us what he knows, and he just flat out refuses. I mean, as much as he keeps putting out these statements that he's bewildered and he doesn't understand or whatever, it's not faring very well for him. He clearly has information.
So before the fact of finding out whether or not Prince Andrew does or doesn't have these information going forward, I would presume he does, hence why he's not being cooperative and, being helpful. So I'm not going down that route that he's not. But let's take this step by step and go through the allegations, shall we? As in what's being said at the minute, which is that with a certain Espetin, yes, done on purpose, guys, what's happened with him, the finding out of his ex-wife or girlfriend actually being involved in trying to, or allegedly at this minute in time, sorting out certain rendezvous and being involved with those types of things. And the fact is that with a particular girl that has been very, very widely, should we say, pushed forward as somebody that has had something happen to her when she was younger with Prince Andrew, and with all 3 of them being in the same picture, as in Prince Andrew, the girl that was alleged that something happened to her while she was underage, and also with the actual wife, girlfriend of Espetin, done on purpose, going out of their way to say that there is some sort of link and the rendezvous was set up by her in point of Espetin and himself being involved in sorting things out. Prince Andrew decided that he was going to push out a statement from his lawyers saying that he's very bewildered about why people keep on asking why he's not being involved and trying to help and trying to give information. Where, as you just heard right there and then, the actual lawyer for all of the alleged victims for Espetin, done on purpose, guys, has actually come forward and said, look, I've personally invited him, Prince Andrew, to come out 3 or 4 times to give over information that he may or may not have, or even just talk about this information, but has declined on numerous occasions. And that's just him personally. And he's also put forward to the fact as well that he knows personally that there have been other people that have asked him to do this, and he's also turned them down flatly. And no, not the dancer, but just generally decided, no, it doesn't really matter. I'm not really interested in actually reaching out and helping or providing any information or even giving access for these lawyers and investigators to actually find situations or information out for themselves. Now, personally, I wouldn't do that either, because anybody that's looking for something will generally find something anyway. But the point was that with Prince Andrew, the Duke, he denies that the lawyer is deliberately evading authorities. In other words, he's come out and said, Prince Andrew, that he is trying to help people, and this American lawyer for all of the actual victims, alleged victims of Espetin, done on purpose, guys, is actually saying, no, I've asked you 3 times. You said nothing. You've declined. So let's carry on with this video and see what else is going forward with the allegations that have been put forward, as in Prince Andrew, the Duke, deciding that he's going to put out more statements saying that nothing's been asked of him, so he doesn't know why they're saying that he's avoiding anything.
He stayed at Mr. Epstein's various residences for a period of time. He met a lot of people who are now making it very well known that they were also victims. He's been a longtime friend of Ghislaine Maxwell. He was a very close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He clearly made observations, heard things, saw things, and engaged in enough with people to where if you have nothing to hide, or if
See, I want everybody to pay attention to that because that's absolutely amazing to me. I have just noticed that a friend has appeared to the stream. We have caught a wild memes of destruction.
Oh, yes, you have. As
How you
I
doing?
party again. My apologies, CSG. I misplaced my glasses.
Ah, no, we can't have the cool memes. We
I
just have to
know.
have the normal one.
You have to see the crazy eyes, man. I've literally was told I was at a previous job and they were going around filming like a commercial for it. They're like, well, we liked what you said, but you've kept doing this thing with your eyes, and it's true because my eyes just kind of jump all over the place. It's like scanning for potential threats, entertaining things, and I'm just plain nuts.
Well, funny enough, we're going to be talking about. I don't know how much you've heard of the stream, actually. How much have you heard of the stream so far?
Not until I got here.
Okay, just a quick recap for anybody that has pulled in or just gone through, and especially for memes as well. We have started off with the idea of going through Prince Andrew, Duke, that has put out a statement today saying that he doesn't know why people are saying that he's deliberately avoiding lawyers or deliberately avoiding people. And we have a video here of the lawyer for all, or at least most, of the alleged victims of Espartine. And I'm deliberately getting the name wrong on purpose. I'm not mispronouncing it. I'm doing it on purpose for obvious reasons with YouTube. Saying that he personally, the lawyer himself personally, has reached out to Prince Andrew 3 occasions and has denied that Prince Andrew has denied that he is going to be any help whatsoever. Has basically just cut contact, just said nothing.
So I mean, it's not unreasonable to, at least in my opinion, suspect that if you have an older gentleman that may or may not have engaged in perhaps questionable things, or the sheer fact that he was friends with somebody and spent a large amount of time around a person that has been convicted and is no longer with us of doing terrible things, according to our legal structure, that you don't want to talk to nobody. That makes sense. But I believe the United States government, I believe it's the Justice Department, they wish to have words with him.
Yes, indeed. And just the lawyer himself has said that he personally has reached out to him 3 times. Now, remember, when they were inquiring about information, to begin with, I'm sure that there is a pipeline, or if you will, a train track that leads to a specific destination in which they want to go down. I'm sure it does. But the initial reaching or contact is to do about information that he may or may not have observed while in the vicinity of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, done on purpose.
Well, this is the thing, Miss. I forget her name.
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yes, Miss Maxwell. She recently was actually apprehended not that far. I actually know a gentleman lives up in where is it? Bedford, New Hampshire. It's actually a very nice suburb of Manchester, New Hampshire, and it's a very nice place up there. I've been there before, but she happened to be in the United States, which a lot of folks say, well, doesn't she have a French passport? So if that is true, then it's like, well, why wouldn't she be in France? Does she feel safer in these United States? I mean, a lot of folks aren't feeling safe right now, but the sheer fact that she was taken into custody, I don't know. I've heard some interesting speculation, and just some of my initial reaction is, oh, well, if she's afraid of, I don't know, slipping or something like that, and people are aware of this, I don't know. maybe the United States custody is one of the safer places. Maybe it isn't. I don't know this, but there seems to be reason. Like you said, that if Prince Andrew happened to have some information, he was aware of this. This is likely going to have a lot of questions be asked of some very influential people.
Yeah, I mean, if, for instance, that Julian Maxwell is somebody that has, let's say, access to information rather than being the predicator of situations or rendezvous, let's say that she just has access to information, she's going to be able to blow circles apart. And I suppose those types of circles, as you quite rightly have inferred, is going to have some very high influential people. And if you have those high influential people and somebody would want to make sure that their name isn't involved, if people are reaching out to you saying, we need some information, would you help? Because if you've got nothing to hide, the general proverb is, you want to help as much as possible, right? Especially to exonerate and clear your own name. You don't run away if you want to clear your name, if you're innocent.
Again, that is the way it should be. However, we also live in the economy, so we all know that nobody would ever take a photo or a general thing and then, let's say, give their opinion to an extreme degree, thereby extrapolating some massive conspiracy hypotheses, if you would. I mean, the optics are generally not good, but I totally see what you're saying. Here's another thing that a lot of folks haven't considered. And the sheer fact we haven't really heard anything about it, it's one of those things that make me go, And again, I have absolutely no evidence or anything like this. I'm not an attorney. I don't work for the Justice Department or anything like that. But apparently, upon the gentleman who's no longer is with us arrest, a great deal of information was seized. And all I know, if what was it, Roger Stone, if they had the full 28 FBI agents and all these vehicles and stuff and taking all this stuff and things, I would think in this other case, they would have acquired a great deal of evidence. I haven't heard anything about that evidence. Have you, CSG? And it makes me just kind of wonder where it's like, okay, if there is something really serious and really nefarious going on, you would take it seriously, and you wouldn't just go out there and be speculating, and you want to make sure all the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed. And if we were going to put the political lens on it, let's just say there always seem to be October surprises. I don't know. These things just seem to happen.
Sure, no, I completely not agree with you. I do think that it's with things like this, it does seem to be more political rather than it being a case of a justice scenario, should we say? As they say, justice is blind, but politics drives everything.
Yeah, it seems to.
It does, unfortunately. Everything's political. But from what you said about...
It also seems more blatant, and it seems to be screwing people now. Here's the thing. Yeah, there's always going to be politicization and stuff like that. But, dude, I'm just witnessing, like, my country be torn apart over a pandemic, our response to it, as well as a response to things that people have been saying need to be addressed for years, but we just haven't. And we've all been cooped up, and people are going kind of nutty bananas and stuff like that.
Sure.
And people are killing each other.
Literally, yeah. No, I completely not agree with you. Before I continue down that road, one thing that I would want to address isn't, and it's not to defend the name that shall not be named, Espartine. But it's not a case of defending him when I say this. It's a case of the information that was garnered or gathered was a case of implicating him. So all the case would have been geared up to getting him. So if you had him meeting other people, you can't actually say or try to get people to come in to go, well, Mr. Espartine, why did you arrange to meet these people and what did you serve as a package? It kind of hasn't got anybody as a question anymore. And it only comes from one side saying, well, he gave me an ice cream. or a pizza for some people that may be interested?
Well, I mean, I do like both those things, but my big thing is I thought this all started with Mr. Aspartame with Mike Cernovich, kind of like, I don't know, tweeting something, and then he started to go, he's like, "Ha, I got him," or something, because he did like some FOIA request and like found some connection. So then they ended up arresting him again because he was arrested, and then he ended up pleading out to something that
Sure.
seemed, yeah.
Sure,
That's
but
kind of what I remember. I just remember, oh, this is kind of a thing. This dude man seems to be spiking a football. This gentleman goes to jail, and yeah, and then he's no longer of this mortal coil, apparently.
sure, no, I completely not agree. But the thing is, when you're doing cases, as you quite rightly pointed out, you can name the names that Espartine has put down into his information that was seized, so to speak. But there's no proof of asking who those names actually were and what they did, apart from it being put down as, let's say, I met this person and I gave him a pizza. That doesn't. You can't really go on the opposite side and go, well, what did you do with Espartine? Because there's nobody there. So what you need is a Gillian Maxwell or a Prince Andrew to come out and say, well, I see these people do these things, and these people did these things with these people.
Right. And some may say that, well, nobody wants to say anything because if somebody gets implicated, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're going to destroy your existence. However, we won't completely destroy your existence if you let us know everyone else and all the horrible things that they did. So now,
Sure.
not only are we asking people to essentially maybe tell the truth, some folks may call it ratting out, but Tim Pool actually brought up, as much as I like to rag on the guy, he did bring up a very interesting point. Apparently, there was something, I think it was when he worked for Vice or maybe one of those other news organizations. My apologies if I got it wrong. But
Sure.
he ended up finding like some story about it's like, all right, somebody posted a link about a story for Reddit. And then all of a sudden, the article just substantially changed, but they never said that this article has been changed, and they kept it at the same link. He's like, well, we should go with this. He's like, well, we're not going to publish it. He's like, well, why not? Because it's like, well, then people will point out that we do the same thing. It's like, wait, hold on, pause, full stop. So what you're saying is we're not going to call out other folks in our industry because we're guilty of the same sins.
Yes. That's generally what people do. That's the reason why it's a code of conduct. Honor amongst thieves, if you want to put it colloquially.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that I have either experienced or completely maybe documented some of this in real life and other situations as well. But I like to think the best of people, but I also look at the incentives in place. I'm like, okay, so how do we incentivize people to tell the truth and do constructive things? I think we need some systemic changes here. That's just my opinion. CSG, continue, sir.
No, I actually agree with you. I do think that there needs to be. I wouldn't use your word because I think that connotates so many different things for so many different people. But there definitely needs to be changes in systems. I do understand what systemic means, but in general, I do think that there needs to be changes in systems and people within the systems themselves, because it's not always the systems themselves that are bad. It's how people operate within those systems using the loopholes that are already in place and so on and so forth. But yes, I do agree with you. But I suppose what I'm going to do is I want to carry on with this video because I think it's actually really interesting, as this is the actual, as I said, the lawyer for the alleged victims, because I can't actually say they are legally victims, but everybody should know what I mean when I say alleged. So let me just put this back a little bit so we can listen to him talk about why he wants to actually get Prince Andrew and the information out there.
Maxwell, he was a very close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He clearly made observations, heard things, saw things, and engaged in enough with people.
Let me just go back a little bit more. By the way, could you hear that properly, or?
Yeah, no, I could hear it fine.
Okay, no problem.
He stayed at Mr. Epstein's various residences for a period of time. He met a lot of people who are now making it very well known that they were also victims. He's been a longtime friend of Ghislaine Maxwell. He was a very close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He clearly made observations, heard things, saw things, and engaged in enough with people to where if you have nothing to hide or if you know information, come share it. If you don't, it certainly makes you look a certain way, and that way is not good.
Do you think he's...
And that's the point that I was trying to get through with that. We know by his own admission, Prince Andrew, that he spent time with Jeffrey Epstein and with Ghislaine Maxwell and with other people in those facilities as well. We know he has information of what may or may not have occurred. So if you wanted to talk to somebody about what happened with Trump or Elon Musk with Jeffrey Epstein, then why would you not give information, to exonerate yourself, for instance? And if you're not going to give the information, why would you put a claim out saying that you aren't deliberately evading authorities when the lawyer is actually saying, look, I personally asked you 3 times, you haven't responded to me. I know the authorities themselves have reached out to you a dozen of times to ask for your help, and nothing's been rehearsed or, corresponded. So it makes you look a specific way.
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you digitally. CSG, I think with this, do you recall a previous interview that Prince Andrew had? It's probably maybe in the past 5-6 months.
Yes, I do not sweat.
Maybe a little longer.
Yes, I do not sweat.
All I remember is I think I listened to a decent bit of it from people that cut it up, and just it wasn't a great look. Now, I ain't saying the dude is guilty of anything. I have no idea. I wasn't there.
The reason,
but it's just,
I can say from honest opinion of watching the whole 56-minute, it wasn't a good interview. He led himself down some very shortcut and very short corridors that he cut off very quickly because he let a little bit of information go and then realized he fucked up.
Now, to be fair to Prince Andrew, I thought his job was he was a prince and also not a politician as well. So he may also be acting in good nature. And again, we don't know. Again, we're doing this essentially guilt by association here. But at the same time, just based upon the mimetic that many people took away from that, it's like, do you want to really go to the United States and have these questions? Go, sir.
The thing is, at the minute, they're trying to get the point of fact of saying, look, you put out saying that you want to help. When we've asked you to help, nothing. Crickets. That makes you look a specific way. If you're saying, look, I am not deliberately running away from information or giving you information, I just haven't been asked. 2 seconds later, sir, I've asked you 3 times. Would you like to help now?
Now, CSG, to play devil's advocate here, or try to dragonsplain away some of this. Now, I believe the official context, again, I'm not an attorney or a barrister or anything like that. You typically send a letter. If you don't receive a response, you send another, and then usually certified this, that, or the other thing. So he may have received 3 letters. However, I'm sure Prince Andrew is very busy, so he probably just hasn't checked his post box.
There is possibilities of him not checking post box, email boxes. Absolutely. But when he's actually saying, look, I want to help, and he knows who the authorities are, you would presume that he would see an address that looks familiar to the authorities that are trying to contact him in some way, shape, or form, and gone, that's something I probably need to take care of.
I think it's going to be hard to say that he doesn't know it now.
Sure. That's definitely a process that could be understood. So we would say that the ball is in his court, so to speak.
My big thing is, okay, they're inviting him to these United States. Okay, let's entertain that. Maybe he allegedly
He's not. Sorry, hang on. He's not being invited to come to the United States to give information. He's actually just been asked to provide information.
Oh, okay. So why can't they just do like what we're doing now, or Skype or something?
They can, but if a person on the other end hasn't found the letter, then that can't be open to initiate something like this.
Oh, well, I mean, does he have an assistant or something that we could reach out to? Because I remember when I
I'm
was trying
pretty
to
sure.
invite- Go on.
I know that he officially has a royal secretary, and he also has 2 or 3 private business secretaries.
Okay, you just reach out to the official channels. It's kind of like when I was trying to invite Jon Stewart.
I'm
to the
pretty
rally
sure
to
they
restore
did.
Sandy and/or Turtles. Basically,
Turtles.
I sent an email and ended up calling the talent agency that he's listed for and stuff. And I was calling in a very short notice, and this was after he basically helped secure the 9/11 healthcare for basically the folks that got sick after the disaster and attack.
Sure.
It's like he was getting all these requests, and I'm like, oh, no worries, I get you and everything. So it's like there are official channels. I mean, you might not get the response you want, but at least you're going through the process. Is it as easy as just adding somebody on Twitter? No, it's not as easy, but I don't know.
Sure, but I mean, if a lawyer himself is saying that he's tried to get in contact with you, I'm pretty sure that he's gone down all official channels to be able to get in contact with you. And I'm pretty sure that all authorities would have gone down all official channels to try and get in contact with you as well. But again, he says that he's yes.
I don't know. One may assume that, but just because we assume something doesn't make it true. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, enough playing devil advocate. I cannot be asked with that shit.
Continue on.
I cannot be asked with that shit. Yes, he may not have done, but if he's deliberately coming out and saying, "Look, I want to help," and people are going, "Well, come help," and he's like, "Ah," it doesn't really matter at that point, does it? He's still trying to dodge. I mean, he's doing a Gohan.
Regardless, let's conclude the interview.
Right. Shouldn't be too much longer. I just want to listen to how she approaches this and how he carries on.
Deliberately, evading authorities.
There's no doubt that he's deliberately evading authorities. I mean, how much more clear? When have you ever heard a U.S. Attorney's Office at a press conference say, "We are inviting you to come over," and he's not on a plane right now coming over? There's no doubt that they want to talk to him. There's no doubt that we have wanted to talk to him, and there's also no doubt that he hasn't spoken with anybody.
So I just want to point out as well, I know that we did all the devil advocacy and everything else like that, but generally for people that are watching this or are going to watch this later on, they're literally saying, look, we've tried every avenue. We've tried the official avenues, and we've even tried calling him out via press conferences or by news outlets. We've tried everything to try and get in contact with him, to try and literally get information out of him any which way that we can. And every time he's deliberately turned and run, so to speak. So where do you go from there when you know that he listens and watches the news, hence why you did the interview last time, because he felt he had to. So where do you go from there?
Well, first off, I'd like to point out that I like that attorney's hair. It makes him seem more trustworthy. Number two, realistically, what I think we're probably going to get out of this CSG again, in my opinion, is it's going to do the same thing President Trump did for like the whole Russiagate and everything. They'll ask him questions. He, with the advisement of counsel, will likely just end up submitting the answers to the best of his knowledge to try to basically help them along with what they need. That's what I see happening, and we're just kind of going through the Shakespearean theater.
I would disagree with the point of the Shakespearean theatre. I personally think, and this is all my own theory, obviously this is anything that I say now is going to be alleged. There is no grain of evidence that I will ever have to be able to provide to this, apart from maybe hearsay. But from what I can see and what I've understood from having a layman's look at any sort of evidence that's been provided, is that Prince Andrew was very, very close friends with Espartine and spent a lot of time with him, and spent a lot of time with other people that were doing the same thing as well. To save his own skin, if he was to start putting people's names or putting what he may or may not have known, even if it was in the way that you've stated, that it was just a cursory overlook of just saying, well, look, this thing happened, as in we were here at this time. Yes, those people were there, but I didn't see anything. He's already not dogged the other person in, so to speak, but he's already broken that code of conduct. So if he does that, then other people are going to say, well, you did this type of thing as well. And I suppose that you should know what the saying is, a house of cards. Once you pull one, they all come down.
That's why I tend to believe it's probably going to be more of a written statement, just because if you're just on a random Skype call, especially if it's being recorded for legal purposes and stuff, it's like you said, it's when you're in that interview, it's kind of hard to necessarily go back. Whereas if you're writing it down, you still got that delete button. You still got the ability to speak with your counsel to best answer. You can always say, I don't necessarily recall as well. I mean, that's always an option.
Sure.
As well. And the reason why I kind of said Shakespearean theater is just because I get what this attorney is saying here. It's just when he was explaining that, when he says he had engaged in enough, had he just said he had been around and would likely be aware, that would make more sense. When he used the word engage, well, it's not necessarily incorrect. It does have also certain connotations. Not alleged he engaged in anything inappropriate, but he used that word, and to me that was kind of a word to elicit an emotional response, because I know it did for me.
Well, no, I completely not agree with you, and I would actually say that good lawyers keep their cards to their chest. And if you're going to go down the road of saying, look, we're trying to contact you just for information of other situations and actually has nothing to do with you, but if it leads to anything, we may do. You don't play that card. You, especially on an interview like this.
It's a subtle elbow drop. It's not quite the people's elbow, but it's an elbow to the sternum.
It's a 5-knuckle shuffle.
Proverbially in Minecraft, of course.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm going with this. If a person is saying that they are interested in trying to help, trying to provide information, but only if you ask. And then the people are asking and going, we've been asking for literally months, like even in press conferences, we tried all the channels where a US attorney has actually sent all of the proper requirements and everything else like that, and done press conferences to try and call your ass out, so to speak. But, you keep on, so to speak, running away. And to me, as you quite rightly said, the emotional response, the response that I get from that is, dude, you've got something to hide. Otherwise, why the hell would you keep on saying you want to help and then run away?
Now again, as far as I understand, not to be ageist or anything, but Prince Andrew is an older gentleman. So my question is, has any of this been on the BBC? Because maybe I'm stereotyping, but I'm not sure what other channels on the telly he might be watching.
He did the interview with the BBC. And then after that, the
recently?
BBC... No, the one that you mentioned 4 or 5 months ago. But the BBC have reported on it. Yeah, the BBC have reported on it. Okay. But a lot of people, both Sky News and the BBC kind of share their reporters and kind of share their reports. So when BBC does something, generally Sky News almost copies and pastes what's been said by the BBC. So vice versa.
So one quick thing, CSG. Let's say you work for Prince Andrew and you receive these letters in the post.
Yes.
Do you want to be the one that brings it to Prince Andrew?
You have to. That's your job.
Is it?
It's up to him. Okay. Unless Prince Andrew has deliberately come out of his way and said to me, if you get letters from these people, bin them, then I can say, yeah, okay, I'll put them in the bin. But my job is to provide correspondence, especially important correspondence like that, to my said governor to be able to provide him with the information he needs to do to sort it out. So I would do unless exposed.
That is technically how it should be, but I will accept your argument, CSG, and raise you Alfred Pennyworth. Because we all remember in the Batman remake, before this most recent iteration, Alfred Pennyworth, he did burn that letter. that basically said that I forget her name, but she was going to pick Two-Face, aka Harvey Dent, over him.
Yes. I do remember. I can't remember the girl's name this point in time, but yes,
he did that for a reason. Again, I'd say maybe Alfred Pennyworth's his reason was perhaps more noble because the people needed the Batman or something. But
no, actually, that was a personal letter directed to Bruce Wayne, which was about personal matters. So the the analogy or the metaphor that you're using at the minute doesn't actually really correspond, because one is personal. If we're going to take it as literal, rather than it just being whitewashed anyway because it's a comic book. But if you're going to take it as literal, one is a personal matter, which was to do with matters of the heart, and this is to do with criminal proceeds that may or may not lead to a conviction of Prince Andrew. You kind of go, yeah, you need to decide what to do with this.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but I'm going to belabor the point in that
I don't want to, but I am.
There was a point in DC where literally they asked, okay, all superheroes, please remove your masks. And everybody took off their masks except Batman. It's like, why isn't he taking his mask off? And someone was like, that's who he really is. It really has nothing to do with this, but it's an excellent bit of banter. I've enjoyed it.
Fine.
We've gone off into the weeds, CSG. I'm sorry.
We shall move on.
So this is not helpful for him unless he immediately comes over and shares all of the information he has. I just don't see how he has any credibility left on this particular subject.
I mean, I'm going to finish with this last little bit anyway, because I don't think I need to go through this last bit. The link for this, if you want to watch it and see all of this and read it, is obviously in the description box below on the channel, so you can read and follow along with us if you so want to. But generally, myself, I have the opinion that when he come to this instance of saying at the end, when he was saying that, look, he's not making himself into a good light or anything else like that, as memes kind of actually said, where did you go?
Well, I hit the wrong thing.
Good.
I hit done.
Damn
I
it.
the link through Twitter. So I hit the done thing, which ended up closing my browser.
Right.
Get back to Twitter.
Fair enough.
Continue on. You had a good point.
Yeah, I was going to go along the lines of saying, look, if you're going to end a press conference with trying to call the man out for not coming out to help you, one of two things is going to happen. One, he will come out and help you. What's more likely is he's going to dig his heels in and go, fuck you in the weeds, so to speak. He's calling somebody out like that, saying, look, if you don't talk to us, you sound guilty, isn't a way of trying to get people to talk. It kind of hinders conversations.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I think a wise man once said, intent is everything. So it depends on how you're coming at it and everything. And if you're going to use certain words, and especially you need to come on over. You need to come on over and share what you have. Whereas if he's like, listen, I mean, we have ongoing legal matter. We have another accomplice that's taken in. We desperately need Prince Andrew to share whatever he may know so we can bring anybody that's committed these horrific acts to justice. So now you're empowering him. You're just trying to basically focus on the inner nobility of your fellow creature. So basically putting it upon him, he needs to help bring people to justice. And you know what, especially if they haven't done anything, that I think that'll touch a lot of people. And even if you have done something, it's like, okay, if I can help, that'll help get the gaze of Sauron off of me. So I mean, it is partially narrative as well. So I mean, again, you were saying, like, depending on how you come at it, that's going to generate how a person responds. So completely
agree, though. I I would throw in a little bit of my own hypothesis on this as well. I do think that what they're trying to do is goad him into going to the United States of America, and as soon as he lands on the United States of America and steps foot on there, technically he's no longer a royal or representative of a royal, and they can arrest him. Because, no expedition needed, he's on soil.
I don't think that would happen without the Queen's consent, man. Because number one, I think he still might be a diplomat. Number two,
not in that instance.
Could
no.
Do that? Could we do that? I believe we absolutely can. But
no, I was meaning legally.
The prince, unless you had very hard evidence, you
technically
he's
not a prince anymore.
Extremely convincing evidence, not just hearsay, man.
It depends. I think it's a ploy. I think they actually have enough evidence to charge the man. I think it's a ploy to get him to come over and to arrest him, to charge him with accessory of the fact, so to speak, or even encouraging. But that's the reason why I think they want him to come over, because he was saying at the end, "Come on over, come give us your information."
CSG, to touch upon something we talked about earlier, because we remember when Mr. Aspartame was arrested recently. Basically, they took a whole bunch of information.
Yes, why was in the US?
Within that information, they did have more or less irrefutable evidence of something like that. That could actually be a complete possibility. You could be right on that.
Yeah. That's what my thinking is. I'm actually to the point of thinking that that's the reason why they want him to come over. And I think that's the reason why he keeps on saying, well, look, I'm trying to help, but, nobody's asked me. I think he's trying to play the game of, if I keep on saying that I'm trying to help, but nobody's in touch with me, then people aren't going, well, you should go over. And the pressure's not there for him to go over.
So do you think he's stalling until the election and seeing well, if depending on who's the White House and depending on what they want to do, this could go very differently? Do you think that's a thing?
I at this point in time don't think that Prince Andrew cares about the idea of timing. I think he's more interested in saving his own skin. I think that the people that are trying to get him to come over are under that period of time, because if they get him to come over now, they can get a case put together for November and draw everybody in that is involved in the case to give evidence or to be a part of the case as accessory of fact. And as you well know, if somehow, even if it's by guilt by association, a certain orange man will be involved in some form of, why did you see these people? And that's enough to tarnish reputations. Even if he did or didn't, just enough to appear is enough to tarnish.
Well, we also can't forget that certain folks that happen to be orange may or may not have also taken a trip. Maybe not as many trips on said aircraft as other people, but it was a very broad spectrum of folks. So that's all
I have no problem in saying that I have my suspicions of stuff like that. But unfortunately, as the law does state and correctly state, without evidence, you cannot prove guilt or assume guilt. You have to wait till you can prove it.
Is that even true, though? Because it's never seemed to be that way while I was alive, or at least since I've... No, CSG, to hit on a philosophical fact or just opinion right here, I'm just looking at this. I was always brought up, at least in these United States, saying it's like, well, you're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
Sure.
Okay. But whenever somebody was accused of something, even on TV, even if it's like, well, they're not guilty or we found exonerating evidence, there's always going to seem to be folks that are like, oh, well, yeah, you're still probably guilty, because that's what I kind of had in my head. And now with social media, like reinforcing that to just such a degree. So I'm like, has that even ever been true? And I'm coming from a place where we used to burn people after labeling them witches.
Sure, but let me go to this point for you. Is it a case of the media witch hunting and calling them probably guilty? Or is it the justice system saying, they're probably guilty? Because those two things are completely different. Yeah, they still affect people the same or similar ways, as in if you're found guilty in the court of opinion, then that is more than enough to tarnish you throughout your whole life. Sure, but that's not proven guilty in a court of law. which is what you're talking about.
I think the justice system, at least in its design, with proper representation, generally works pretty darn well at protecting people's rights.
Sure.
But it's just, and I think you bring up a good point of, is it necessarily the media? Well, the media is focusing on certain stories. Why are they focusing on certain stories? It's like, well, people want to hear different things.
Sure.
And depending on maybe what you're interested in and maybe some of your affiliations, certain things will interest you more than other things. I mean, this is just freaking natural, man. So it's
Sure.
like, and to be fair, the media is of the people as well. It's made up of people. So
Yeah, it's
like,
all opinion.
Right.
Yeah, no,
exactly. What we're doing here right now, and we all know, like, the more and more salacious and stuff you get, it's like that just kind of winds people up. Whereas if you're trying to talk a little bit more nuanced, if you will, and try to actually separate fact from, in my opinion, that in and of itself, it takes, I think, a certain amount of effort to do it well, because you're never going to be perfect, but you can try to get better, and you also need to garner that goodwill, and that takes time.
Sure. No, I completely agree with you. And let's take this stream, for instance, when we were just talking about Prince Andrew, the Duke, so to speak, and me putting my hypothesis at the end of this little segment. If I was on Fox News, CNN, or wherever, people would be saying, yeah, that's right, or yeah, that's wrong. People would make their own decisions. But the people that would decide, yeah, that's right, would be a case of, I've now swayed their opinion. Because I swayed their opinion, they think it's now fact. And proving something from opinion to fact in people's minds is so much easier than what it is to prove it on paper.
Well, the funny thing is CSG is what you just had right there in that little explanation. That would have been your 30 seconds on the segment.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You can parse everything. Like, what was that? I was watching, I saw one of the internet clips of like the Five and everything. And Jesse Waters ends the thing when they're kind of going back and forth. Because like Juan Williams actually made like a good point. He's kind of more of, I hate to say they're token liberal, but I mean, like, I feel like he's their token left guy. It's kind of like I feel like on this part of the internet very often. It's like, oh, I feel like the token liberal, the token left guy. And it's like, he actually made a very good point. And they're like, oh, Juan. So I kind of chopped it up. It ends with Jesse Waters saying, he's like, Fox News, making people's lives hell. I'm like, is it blatant virtue signaling? Like, of course it is. But it was funny. I put it to like Purple People Eater and stuff because that's what I do.
But that's the thing, though, isn't it? When a lot of people go from, it's the reason why NewsQuest itself, which is why I titled it NewsQuest rather than it being in my opinion, which is what it will be titled for the next initiations, or installation, sorry. But why we're still talking about this at the moment, I wanted to name this NewsQuest because we're still trying to get that point across that, yeah, this is our opinion. But what we do want from NewsQuest is a case of it being, we don't want opinion at the minute. We want your videos. We want physical proof of what's going on in certain protests. Again, if somebody is protesting and somebody says racist things and then gets hurt for it or arrested for it, then we want to make sure that we've got the right person, the right things that have happened, and to make sure that it's correct so it can be used in the court of law or used in the court of opinion, so to speak, as we just put onto as the minute. That's what we want from NewsQuest. So for anybody that is actually watching or watches later, I will remember this time, ladies and gentlemen, I will put all the links for NewsQuest for joining it for the first 1,000 people as well. You would be grandfathered in when it becomes a more sustainable source of news and archives. You would be grandfathered in if you sign up now to be able to see all the archives, see all the information and keep it all free and whatnot. So sign up now if you can. Links will be provided this time, I promise, in the description box or as a pinned comment later on. I will get all of the links this time and remember to post them. But generally, that's what we want from NewsQuest, is to make sure that we get all of the evidence. We get all angles and we don't put our bias onto it. Because from what meme and memes are doing at the minute, where we're talking about Prince Andrew, we're going to move on to the Boston statue very, very shortly. But when we're talking about that, we are only giving our opinions. And yeah, we can back up some of our opinions with facts. Sometimes we can provide more figures or even provide more antidotes to back up our own opinions and so on and so forth. But all of that is to do with opinions. With NewsQuest, we want it to be a case of send us in your videos, send us in your news sources, news stories with video evidence so we can archive it, and then we can get rid of the bias in the media, Fox News, CNN, BBC, Sky News, whatever, because they will have to come to us to get the news, because you guys are going to provide the news specifically for real, rather than it being twisted.
Power from the people.
From the people to the people and by the people.
Right on. Right on. That's a good logo.
Yeah.
I think we're going to use that. Well, that's the big thing, CSG, because, and one of the other things that we want to do to try to help clarify, because I think one of the problems that we have right now is we start confuzzling different stories together. Because I noticed, like, even Adam on the Timcast IRL podcast, like, Tim was literally confusing Seattle and Portland. To be fair, they both are in the greater Northwest, but it's like there was one situation and he was combining two different situations that happened at two different cities with like the same locale. And we started ascribing very often a lot of negative connotations. It's like, well, this happened here, blah, blah, blah. And why does that happen? Well, we have all these stories, and I think they're just kind of under keywords in our head or something. This is how my brain thinks about it of, okay, oh, Black Bloc, Antifa, oh, there was violence, this, that, and people just have certain associations. Whereas if everyone is an individual and each story is its own story, we should focus on that. So what we're going to try to do is put in an interactive map. So basically, again, because people are going to be reporting, and at least as we actually get up and going, who, what, when, where, why, and how if they would like. So if we have the where, and again, with the application, we may have the ability to turn on GPS should somebody want to, so we could automatically tune it in there, or somebody just puts the general location, the city, the state, the province, wherever it might be, generalized location. So now, if we could overlay that onto like Google Maps or something, you could literally scroll across and go, oh, somebody has a story from Tokyo over here. Oh, well, this one happened in Seattle, in the Northwest. This one happened in Portland. I can visually see these are two different locations and click right on it and get a video and videos from the area.
Yeah, sounds absolutely amazing, and that gets rid of people putting their own schemas, their own idea of trying to make things easier, their own idea of putting, as you said, if Antifa are doing this, this, and this, then they must be doing it in this place and this place, rather than it actually being what's actually happening. Because let's be honest, guys, we have our own biases and we look to confirm our own biases, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. It's a human thing. But as soon as we know about it, we can try and stop those biases from happening. Because if we're calling out one side from it, then we should be calling out our own side as well.
That you hit the nail right there, CSG, because that's a big thing. Because it's okay to be wrong. It doesn't necessarily make you stupid. Because if you get more information, I mean, now you have more information. If you're operating from imperfect information, you have your initial inferences and stuff like that. It's okay. Sure. You'd be wrong and learn a little bit more. And that's one of the things that, again, I'm going to go into a 20-second Tim Pool rant right here, is speaking about calling out your own or something like that. That's one of the things what we want to do with NewsQuest, is because all I know is, and I only found this out from Tim on the podcast because I haven't seen him do a video on it. Maybe he will be posting a video soon, but apparently there was an individual that happened to have a Nazi flag in their front yard. Somebody went over to take the flag and they ended up with 4 bullets in them. And I literally saw this. Somebody posted on Facebook and stuff, some of my more leftish friends, and I'm like, okay, well, this is a thing. This sounds like something that was done over politics. Why aren't certain people covering this? It's like, you mention it, you know it happened, but you're not covering it. And I'm like, doesn't that sound like news? I don't know.
It's to do with narrative. As far as I know, from what I've seen, I've noticed something similar to that. It may not be the same story, so please don't quote me as this is the same story. But I've seen a similar pattern with something, and I'm assuming that it's something that's similar. It may not be the same. But there's a story that has just gone round on Twitter, which I was considering putting onto the show, but I wanted to talk about these because we've already been going for an hour and 10 minutes, and we've only done one story. So I knew that was going to happen, so I've limited things. But there was a story on there which was Grand Wizard of the KKK admits to shooting into the protesters. And I was looking at it, I was thinking, I wonder how many people. Yeah, no, honest, it's on over Twitter at the minute. I was wondering how many people are actually going to even bring this up. People on the right, people on the English right, or people on the American right. Are they actually going to say, well, yeah, what he did, being a Grand Wizard of the KKK and admitting that he did this, is that a bad thing? Me personally, I can stand here, hand on fucking heart, and say, yeah, if you're just shooting into a group of protesters because they're protesting, you're a cunt.
That's either murder or attempted murder right there. It's like, it don't matter what the hell you identify as or are. It's just you are shooting at human beings right there. And this is one of the things. And if this is accurate, if this is accurate information going around here, it kind of goes into the whole. It's like, well, at least the mimetic in my head, again, in my opinion, it seems like a lot of folks on the left are saying, well, Antifa, that's a figment of your imagination. And you got folks on the right saying, neo-Nazis, clans, those are just figments of your imagination, nothing to see here. And it's like, if it is true, and this is just because of people's effing narratives here, it's like, really, are we going to just ignore reality just until like freaking it bites you in the face or the butt or whatever? It's like, dude, sometimes you got to brush off vanity and show reality. So
yeah, it may be 2 years old and may just be recirculating. It may be 2 years old.
Okay, so it's from
2 years old.
Protest for above. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's at least 2 years old. 21st of August and April, mostly in April.
Well, my
it looks like the incident.
Okay, those are reports. Somebody would have words with this individual seeming to admit to shooting at human beings. I'm curious if there was.
Oh no, he's been arrested and he's gone to court over it. Yeah. Oof.
But
sleeping KKK Imperial Wizard shot dead by wife.
Oh, is that what happened?
Apparently, yeah. No. The actual Klansman himself only got 4 years for firing the gun at a black protester on purpose. He only got 4 years.
Okay, I have to see again. I'm not an attorney or anything, but that seems a little low for just firing and attempting to kill somebody. But the sheer fact that this is another thing that people can do. They can just post a link to an article or video that may even just be from the past or something. And as soon as you see that headline, it seems like, I don't know, nobody would ever just post a link like I have in the past, just with a title to help try to prove your point, because it's a lot easier than having a long thought out conversation with somebody.
Well, it's literally what I've just done. I was going to have it's a story that I've just seen recirculate. I may not even have the right thing. It may have only just happened. So Twitter is normally quite good on picking up news. Maybe there's no news about it at the minute. But I just typed in exactly what I just said, as in Grand Wizard KKK member shoots in protest. And I get a story from 2 years ago, 2018 and 2019. So is it a story that's going around again? Or is it something that's happened? And has they done what I've done and gone, that sounds like it's relevant for today?
Well, CSG, to bring it back to News Quest as well, what is the factor there? When?
Yeah.
It's another W.
Yeah, it's another win.
I do appreciate you using the logo and everything, because the sheer fact that you and some other folks I got a good bit of respect for in this internet stuff and things are saying, yeah, there's a reason why I'm doing this project, even though I know I'm not necessarily getting paid right now. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't at least a good idea in their minds.
It's definitely a good idea. I think it's something that can definitely counteract narratives that are set up by YouTubers, narratives that are set up by small media outlets and even bigger media outlets. So it's definitely a way of being able to counteract those narratives that are being set and that way people will be forced by essence to start reporting the news factually rather than opinionated. Because all news seems to be opinionated news rather than it being factual news. All opinions are rooted in some form of fact, but are mistreated into this is my opinion of this fact, rather than just leaving it as said.
So speaking of reporting and statues, you got a story about the Boston thing, and that's very interesting because I was planning on attending an event tomorrow on the 4th, I believe. So
yeah. So obviously you can read. I'm sure you know this more than I do, but for people that haven't seen this or anything else like that, this is the Boston City statue of the Emancipation Proclamation of the slave that is, as you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, where the picture is on top of the other picture I'm doing at the minute. That is literally the slave being able to pull away his chain so he can stand up. Because at this point in time, it was to be the fact of them celebrating them freeing the slaves. Now, you could argue that the slaves should have been freed anyway and there should never have been slavery. And I agree with you. But that's not what the history is. And this is the history of celebrating the freedom of the slaves. But yet, for some reason, people, well, I know what the reason is, but for this reason, people want this statue to be taken down because it doesn't show the slave or freed slave in a positive light. And from what I understand, is because they think that he is bowing to Abraham Lincoln, it makes him looks like the slaves were completely freed by the white man and slaves did nothing in fighting against the South, so to speak, to be able to earn their freedom and get their Emancipation Proclamation through their own initiative and their own fighting and, fighting for their freedoms. Because let's be honest, if the Union didn't invite slaves to be able to fight to earn the right to get their freedoms, as in being a free man if you fight in the Union, then they wouldn't have won. The South had more people. They were more industrialized. From what I understand from history.
The North had more infrastructure stuff. Again, I'm not a Civil War expert. I would ask MC or Matt on that.
True.
But the thing is, I think one of the reasons for taking this down, and I'm curious now, did the city council vote on this? Did they put it?
Yes.
Are they going to be putting up a referendum or something? Because if the people in the area want to take it down, which it's Boston, so in my opinion, I tend to think they will be. So what I think will happen is they'll probably take the statue down, and then they'll have a referendum or something. Maybe if they want to put it back up, I kind of doubt that. My thing is, if you want to take it down, put it in a museum, or if you want to use some capitalism and I don't know, maybe sell it to the highest bidder. Now you have additional funds. If you could sell that for like $1 million or something, man, $1 million will feed a lot of people, man. That's a lot of meals, even at just $5 a meal, and you can get your dollar can go a lot further than that. Well, at least it used to. Yes, inflation is a thing. Now, for reasons for taking it down, I'll give you a little bit of a different take, and this is just based upon folks that I've talked to and everything. Is in that light, if you see that, you see Abraham Lincoln. He's standing up. He has his presidential attire and stuff on. And then you have an individual that is breaking the chains of bondage. That's basically on his knees, lower, at least in retrospect, to Lincoln there. So
Sure.
I think there are a number of folks out there that kind of still view that as showing as a black man less than a white man there.
Sure, and I completely understand that their take of that, because visually it looks kind of like that if you don't look closely. If you're having the cursory glance, as most people do when looking at statues, your interpretation then comes your interpretation. And once you've had that interpretation, it's very hard to change that interpretation because art is very visual. It's very a case of how it speaks to you as an individual, and everybody can interpret art in some slight or different way. And I get that. But for instance, with the metal that was used to be able to bring this together, for instance, not all, but most of the metal was put forward by the bonds themselves of free slaves. Same as I believe that the slaves themselves, is it the original marble statue? I believe it's the original marble statue in Washington that they actually put towards the whole £20,000 or dollars, sorry, at that time.
As to my understanding, the original or whatever the statue is in DC,
Yes.
that was basically funded by individuals that were formerly enslaved.
Yes, free slave.
Now, and what you just listed right there is if this was actually cast from broken bonds like that, I mean, that is powerful. But then again, I'd almost say if folks want to, which I tend to, again, Boston, I believe they would, you could almost just melt that down and make something better if you want. Again, I big on the history and stuff, but
sure,
I don't know. I mean, you could transform it into something more updated and something, and just you still have what was there, but you reforged it into something better. I don't know. Again,
no. I've heard the argument. No, I completely heard the argument, and I think a lot of people do get attached to the idea of history being set a certain way, and historical monuments, for instance, having their standard in time. I mean, most people wouldn't go and say, "Look, Big Ben's out of commission at the minute." The tower, not the bell, but in general, what we would consider Big Ben, as in the actual tower itself, being out of commission, so let's demolish it. Most people would sign petitions to say, let's keep it up, so on and so forth, because of it being a very touching historical monument that means so much to people. I think that this has a powerful meaning and is a powerful tool for the fact of showing that people were of a certain way in history, but the mistakes that were made and the brutality that was committed should never be forgotten. But as this statue is celebrating that people change and history is set by the victors and it is changed by people that are willing to fight for that change. Now, the argument could then be, but we're trying to do that now by changing the statue. And I agree, that is something that could be argued upon. But what you're doing at this minute in time is saying that your interpretation of this statue, not necessarily yours, but in general, your interpretation of this statue means more than the people that helped design it, that helped pay for it, that helped erect it, that were free slaves. Your interpretation of this statue is more important than the people that helped found it, make it, and build it. I don't see how that is more important from you now, as in everyone, than what the slaves and free slaves decided to do as celebrating their freedom and marking that freedom.
Again, maybe not for this particular statue, but apparently what I've heard from other folks on this internet stuff and things is that some of these statues, specifically like commemorating like certain Confederate service members and stuff, some of these things, while you can make the arguments to know where we came from, I think a lot of these were put up in the 20s and stuff. And I've heard it said that this was also to help reinforce Jim Crow, letting folks know that you are another. You are other than us. Like, we are separate in everything. The whole, like, separate but equal stuff like that and everything. You know, like, and again, I
and their arguments.
I take a pragmatic thing for this, because if this was made from bonds that were broken, let's
forget that. I may be wrong about that. I may be wrong about
that in that metal. So I would almost say, if that was the case, what I would propose would be make a copy, get a cast, forge an exact copy of that statue that if they want to put it in a museum, save it or something, and melt down that same metal and reforge it into just something different, just something better. And again, that's just my initial opinion. if that was the case and everything, because I think that would be meaningful. But again, for pretty much everything that I see going on, if it's the will of the people, if the people want to have it done, vote on it. And because
Sure,
I
no,
truly think that
I
the will
agree.
is there now to basically a lot of these statues that folks got problems with. It's like, okay, put it to a vote for the community. I think you're going to see a very large majority of these things be taken down. And then you take away the conservative argument of saying, well, you're not following due process. Guess what? The folks didn't want it there. Well, what are you going to argue with? Democracy, the people actually following due process? People will still argue against it. And you know what? That's fine. But at least it seems fair.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you. Though I would say that I would want it left to the people in Boston. From what I heard from the people that did the committee, it was from people that were even visiting Boston. And if you have a big group of certain people with certain ideologies that don't even know the history of the statue voting on it, then that can be swayed on opinion very, very quickly, or interpretation very, very quickly. I would personally say that if the statues are in those areas and it then goes to a vote and the people in those areas that have to look at it every day are the ones that decide to get rid of the statue, then fine. Then that's democracy. That's what it is. I would actually agree with you that I do think that some statues do have the right to at least even be talked about, being deposed or defaced, or not defaced, but being taken away. I agree. But I think a lot of these conversations are now being put with so much pressure from certain groups that if people were to find out who voted no, there may be backlash from people losing their jobs from it. I would prefer, and this is a preference, and again, my opinion, but I would prefer these topics being talked about in 6 to 8 months' time, so to speak, when the anger and vitriol that has come from particular movements has not necessarily died, but the initial raw anger and the raw vitriol has dissipated, and people are able to have actual conversations about why the statue is the way why it is, and why certain people want to keep it the way that it is, and why certain people want to get rid of it. Because at the moment, I'm sure most people have seen the fact of a elder black statesman being able to stand in front of the protected statue as it was, talking to another Black Lives Matter protester, while the Black Lives Matter protester was screaming and shouting at him, and the other guy just talking, being all calm. That's how I see this political discourse going at the minute. People being very angry, and other people trying to explain why they actually want it, and both sides not necessarily listening. And to me, if you've got more people that are angry and you're being led by an angry mob, it's not really democracy. That's just populism.
Yeah, you shouldn't just go around bullying people. The argument to do it now is the fact, like you said, tempers will kind of go down because we had this big thing, Charlottesville. This already happened 4 years ago. Her name was Heather Heyer.
I can't remember.
That was
I think with
Brett Weinstein's wife, Heather Hay, professor, pardon. But here's the thing: we had this issue, and then it just kind of went away as well. So there is a certain sense of urgency. Is that okay? If we have momentum, we need to get as much as we can get done now. That's within our power, because again, as soon as people move on to other things and everything, very often we never see change. So I mean, that is the counter argument.
Sure.
And again, you don't do it with violence. And I agree with the way that you said you do it in a more calm way, because that's the thing. If you just got, let's say you got like the protest I was in, there were probably about 600 people there. People were trying to kind of keep distance, although when we were kind of marching down the street, I'm not gonna lie, we're definitely closer than 6 feet apart. Even though people were kind of trying, I kind of ended up getting more to the outskirts to kind of cover the crowd a little bit towards the end. Everyone I saw was wearing a mask, was peaceful and everything. But the sheer fact that if you could get 500, 1,000 people that are all peaceful and everything, I don't know, that sounds more kind of like the Gandhi mimetic there. It's like, if
It's
you
a
are
hell of a lot more
peaceful and you
powerful.
consistently see people there, it's just, if you go around and you just start throwing rocks and stuff like that, people are like, okay, well, now you're agitating folks. Another factor as well is there were police officers there at the protest I was at. There were probably like, I don't know, 7 to 10 bike cops, and they were keeping about 50 yards behind and everything, but they also weren't in cruisers. They weren't in tactical gear. They were just
Sure.
in like bike uniforms with helmets and stuff like that. So it's like they weren't bothering us. We weren't bothering them. And I do truly think a lot of this is in escalation, because if you got friggin' 100 officers, they're there with like heavy riot gear, shields, batons, and stuff like that. That looks like somebody that could very quickly hurt you. So some folks kind of, they feel on edge, and then it just takes a couple of assholes to go out there, start something, and they're like, oh, well, they're attacking us because it's our group. And then the police are feeling, oh, they're attacking our group. And then you just have escalation. You see all these things that happen. And again, to go back to News Quest, so if we can have this raw footage to show what's happened before and after, yeah, you might see the quick viral clip. But then if you have easy access to see what actually happened, and enough folks have access to that, it's like, okay, now you have the ability to debunk things. Oh, this is what happened. Yes, that happened. Here's before, here's what happened after. It seemed, it's a way to kind of make rage more impotent.
No, I actually completely not agree with that. Though I suppose, add to the fact of on that one. I do. Let me ask you this, because I think it would be better me asking it as a question rather than trying to frame it as a statement. If you have lots of angry people that you know have the power to force through legislation because people are scared of backlash of going against them at the minute, is that democracy or is that a form of populism?
To pass through the legislation, I mean, that's due process. To just go by mob rule, that ain't what we are. We're a constitutional republic over here. That is something that concerns me when you start seeing people be charged. And again, if you have evidence for this and you believe this is the case, okay, you go through the process. You can charge them. You can do the grand jury thing. I feel a lot of these things are kind of being brought up serendipitously.
Yeah,
Like I
that's the
believe
one.
there was a gentleman in Arizona who he ended up shooting at somebody, which, at least according to the picture, looked like either that or another individual said, "We will kill you," and it really looked like that individual had a blade that was coming at him. So it's like, I believe he was initially charged with potential homicide or attempted murder or something, and then
Sure.
they quickly kind of dropped out there. And it's like, okay, if you're just leveling charges to try to calm people and then do stuff like that, it's like, is that really what you have there? And it's like, the sheer fact that in previous cases, like, you'd see something that seemed egregious, and a lot of folks are like, well, we're not going to charge these people or anything here. And now the fact that, oh God, I forget the young gentleman's name, but he was like 21, 22 years old. He was like 5'6", 140 pounds or something like that. He bought some iced teas. He actually had a face covering on. You want to know why? Because he was anemic, man. He would get
Sure.
very cold and everything. And literally, somebody made a call. The cops ended up running up to him because he wasn't responding, because he had earbuds and headphones on playing
Sure.
music. They grab him and everything. He ends up losing his life, man. And it's just
horrible.
The sheer fact that they're reopening this case. It's like, okay, in some instances, yeah, there were things that we probably just glazed over. And the sheer fact that this happens does seem like complete BS, in my opinion. But if we
Yeah, of
go
course.
all the way to the other degree and then just start charging people for things that there might be a chance that you're not going to be able to prove it in court, and you're just trying to do that that's the thing, man. People are being taken on an emotional roller coaster. That's like corporate sales 101. Just keep on getting people's emotions high, low, because well, how else are you going to get somebody to sign a 10, 15, 20, 30, $50,000 contract with somebody you just met like 2 or 3 hours ago?
Sure. I mean, the reason why I asked the question between democracy and populism and the idea of the council culture or the backlash in itself wasn't necessarily to go into the actual council culture at the minute. It was to try and draw a comparison of calmer heads, older heads, are saying that they of the black community as well, believe it or not, in actual fact, people that are related to even trying to get his name right.
Dr. King.
Archer, no. Archer Alexandra, which is the person who is the model of the actual slave or freed slave in the casting. So his obviously long lost descendant is coming out and explaining what's going on as well. By the way, somehow this person is related to that cast, as in the person who is being cast, and is a cousin of Muhammad Ali. I will play that video shortly, but there's also a Gwen who is a historian, local historian, that actually goes through the interpretation of it. And she's saying that she wants to keep it up. The point that I'm trying to say is that between that person that we were talking about, the older statesman versus the protester, is that if we're having people screaming and shouting about getting rid of these statues, but a majority of people that live in the local area actually want to keep it, if they were to go on the idea of the people that are in the area at the minute are able to vote, that may not even live there, I'm not saying that they do or they don't, is that not populism by its sheer definition? As in, this is a popular idea because it's being forced through, because of the anger, because of literally people voting on their emotions, not knowing the full context, not knowing the full emotional, as you said before, emotional understanding, or even the interpretation of the original people who actually set the statue up by paying the 20 grand to even set it up and agreeing to the design, the free slaves themselves. So if people don't even know that, how can they make an informed decision? To me, that sounds a lot like, should we say, pinpointed populism. Let's focus on this. If they were to put their ideas more into legislation of trying to change the police reform, for instance, I think most people would be behind them. But a lot of people are thinking there's ulterior motives to getting rid of the statues, and they're not having a calm, collected display about it. And in most cases, they're not even having a discussion or even a vote on it. They're just pulling them down. To me, it really does seem like populism that the left themselves cry out saying that this is wrong. I just wish that leave it a couple of more months, have the discussion with people that live in the area, and then maybe or maybe not, depending on how the votes are, get rid of it. Have due process. Because at the minute, it doesn't seem like it's a proper form of due process. It does seem like it's purely fueled on emotion.
Well, that fuel is fueling a raging wildfire that recently has consumed a fellow furkin. Apparently, there was a statue of an elk or something that was torn down and or lit on fire for some. I haven't looked into it just because it sounds horrific. But I digress. I feel like there's a lot of heat right now going on. People aren't sure necessarily what to do. If somebody starts doing something, even if it isn't the most constructive thing, a lot of folks are like, well, something's happening. I want to be part of it. What I would say is take this energy, take this momentum, if you would, and focus that heat, focus that fire into a highly focused torch to actually help weld things into the system or to break certain things that are holding people back. Let's help reforge this system into something that's better. As far as police reform go, I'd say badge cams now, universal badge cams. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to ask for because, number one, if the police are engaging in things that are inappropriate, we will have information. We will have video evidence of that. Number two, it also helps protect the cops because if somebody makes an allegation, they'll have actual video evidence to show that that did or did not actually occur as well. It'll help us see the truth, as well as, I would say, and also more training to officers specifically for de-escalation as well, because I think that's
I
something
agree.
that the police in the UK heavily focus on, de-escalating situations. It seems at times, for whatever reason, our police kind of take a different approach. I realize our cultures are different as well. And the third thing, and probably one of the most important things as well, is educating the American people on their rights. Man,
Yeah.
if we're not teaching civics, we should also teach physics. Civics as well, just people being able to know that, okay, I have the right to do this. This would be a violation of my rights just because they didn't know.
Sure.
If we've spent at least half a year just focusing on that in a couple of classes in high school or probably even earlier on, I think that would make a huge difference. But continue on, CSG.
No. I mean, on the idea of reform, I absolutely agree. But the reason why I say with the idea of reform, put the energy, like you just said, into the idea of reforming, is because legislators can then calmly decide how to improve that aspect, where the funding does or doesn't go. Where if we're voting on a singular issue of getting rid of statues or doing this or doing that, that's a singular issue that doesn't have any other form of legislation bar the idea of populism. And I say that without unreserved worry. This is generally populism, as in it's a popular idea at the minute to get rid of statues without finding out the reasons why they were there or even debating why they were there to just get rid of them. That is by definition populism. I just don't think that that's a good look. I'm. Besides that, I really want to play this video. It's only 36 seconds long because I think it's really important. Because this is somebody that's been in and around the area and knows the statue very well, and I just wanted to play a video because it's important.
People tend to think of that figure as being servile, but if a second look, you will see something different perhaps. That man is not kneeling on two knees with his head bowed. He is in the act of getting up, and his head is up, not bowed, because he's looking forward to a future of freedom. People have said, well, he's chained to Mr. Lincoln. Closer look, you will see that while there's a shackle on his right hand, he's holding the end of a broken chain, which means he has taken his freedom. He now realizes he's free. So I say, leave it, let it stand. People.
Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to play. The interpretation is interesting because of how the statue was actually designed compared to how people that are only looking at it are interpreting it. And I think that the interpretation is a valid one. It's their interpretation, but that's not what the actual design was meant to be. As she quite rightly said, he's looking up the free slave. He's looking up at the actual Emancipation Proclamation. He's looking at the paper that's on top of the pillar. As in, that's my freedom. This is my future. As she quite rightly says, he's in the process of getting up. I'm in the process of being treated as an equal. Because remember, just because they were actually being freed at that point in time, they were nowhere near equal. Equal didn't come for another 10 to 15 years later, and then was taken away again. Then taken away again. Remember, after all, they were allowed to be able to run for Congress, then everything else like that. South was different, as in that they had to be able to do different voting aspects, as what they would call a poll tax, a literacy test, stuff like that. I do know the reasons after 1876 how things changed. Do know, but generally they were treated as equal up to that point. After that, anyway, point being, they were going to become equal, and that was the point of the statue. It was to show initiative of where they were and where they were going, because they weren't level at that point.
Now, I think the argument to that would be if you had the same statue, because again, that's the narrative, but where they could be, because there does seem to be something, and I had a conversation recently with an individual, happened to be a Spanish gentleman, and he just straight up said, just almost as a matter of factly, I'm like, oh, dude, you can go up and do this. He's like, a Spanish guy? Nah, man. I'm just like, and that made me incredibly sad, dude. The sheer
I agree.
fact that this gentleman in 2020 United States is just thought, for the sheer fact that he happened to be a Latino, that's going to hold him back. And that does seem to be a mindset there. And to just kind of go into the point of kind of like they're getting up and getting there. Would not a better interpretation of that statue now be the gentleman standing fully erect, gazing Abraham Lincoln in the eye, and literally just with one hand has the broken bonds and is letting them go? Like, I feel like that would be a powerful image. Maybe it's still not even appropriate, but at least just showing that a black man is on the same level as a white man right there. And just, I feel like that's a stronger mimetic, because I do think, and again, that young lady's take on it, I do truly think that's powerful as well. But again, I always tend to default back to let the people vote on it. And again, Boston, I tend to believe folks would probably put it in a museum. Maybe they'd auction it off, and they'd probably have local folks come together and put together something new. But
sure. I mean, I don't actually have. No, I agree. I personally don't have any disagreement with the idea of doing a new statue and doing something similar to what you said. But the point of the statue was that the free slaves wanted to show where they saw their future going, from where it was to what they helped design, because it was approved by a committee of mostly white people, but they did help in the design of said statue, and they also paid for said statue. So it was what they wanted. They did sign off on it. And I think that's the most powerful thing that you could ever have in your history. Those freed men, those former slaves, helped design that statue to encompass what they felt at the time was hope of how they were to how they fought and knew that they were in the process of becoming equal. The hope of looking at the Emancipation Proclamation, the idea of knowing that they're going to be standing up shoulder to shoulder with great men like Abraham Lincoln, knowing that they were going to be doing all of this. And I just think that people that don't know the history, that just think, oh yeah, that's just Abraham Lincoln patting a good slave on the head. Hyperbolic, of course, but that's their interpretation. Sure, they're entitled to it, but there's so much more meaning to that statue and why it was erected in the first place. Commissioned by slaves, helped designed by slaves, former slaves. But that isn't that more powerful than people nowadays saying, oh, it should be this or it should be that. Slaves at the time, former slaves at the time, decided and helped design that. Shouldn't they have the right to have that?
We also have structures that have been built in the past that they may be historic, but sometimes we put up new things. At times we demolish things, but very often they'll move a lot of those things to another location. Sometimes a small historic house or something, it will physically get moved. They'll put something new there, and then sometimes people again will buy them and this is the thing that kind of gets me. It's just like, okay, you can tear something apart, you can tear it down. It's again like apparently somebody's in a coma that happened after a statue partially fell on them. Like hopefully they have a quick recovery. But you look at what's going on, it's like, dude, if you could literally sell this to people, like there are people out there like, oh, that's a piece of history. And you know what, regardless of what their intentions are, it's like, if you can get $1 million, it's like, dude, that's like what? I don't know, 20,000, 200,000 meals for people that are going hungry on the streets and stuff. Like I
for how long?
Well, this is the thing, man. One, history is being preserved because, I mean, this is art. You might not like it. You might find it distasteful. But again, if it is the will of the people, if they want to raise money for their communities by putting this up for auction or in a museum.
But they don't want to do that, though, do they, Memes? They just want to get rid of the statue.
Well, just want to. We often listen to some of the loudest voices because
the loudest ones are the ones that are driving the loudest voices are the one that are driving the votes at the minute, though, aren't they, my friend? Or just pulling them down in general.
We have seemed to get away with that. A lot of folks, they are acting on the council level again. I would like to see personally a lot of referendums put up, because then we can actually figure out what people are feeling and what they actually would like to do. And again, just in my opinion, in Massachusetts, I feel like you put that up for a vote, I think you're going to see a lot of these statues end up coming down regardless of that. In different places, it might be different, but at least you're following due process. And it's just,
sure.
I hate when it breaks into the binary. It's like, oh, it's either this or that. It's like, well, couldn't we do something more pragmatic where we don't completely piss everyone off and maybe can have a positive thing? And I just don't see that happening very often. And that makes me sad. No,
I completely not agree. Though, let me attack it from this angle rather than going down general well-worked paths, so to speak. If we're in the process of trying to understand and remember and sort out the history that was and is slavery, so to speak, within American history, why would you want to take away a statue that was designed, paid for by the former slaves of the time? If we're in the process of trying to remember their history, remember their struggles, their strives, the actual people that were there, why would it be a case of it's okay to get rid of this statue in particular? Obviously, there are other statues that may definitely need some warranted talking about, and I agree with you on that. But this statue in particular, it seems that the interpretation of modern day people that haven't actually taken the time to even do a cursory glance at the history, even like I've only done a cursory glance and I see it's made by slaves, in essence. Why is it a case of they have the right, so to speak, to take that away from the slaves that were the ones that made it and wanted it to stay there? If the process is to remember slavery and remember how bad slavery was.
Well, these people aren't slaves that are calling for this, right?
Obviously.
Right. So, I mean, things have changed. Times have changed. It's at least hopefully we're supposed to be equal in everything. And understand there was a period of time where, yeah, folks might have been free, but they were separate but equal. I mean, it would be nice to see something that would show that we're past that point, that we actually are equal. I mean, again, that's my opinion on it.
No, I agree. May I quickly step in though, because I don't want it. I know that you've got limited time at the minute.
Time's running out.
Yeah. What you just said there is absolutely fine. Maybe there should be other statues that encapsulate today's essence. But why should that statue be taken away from the essence of the time that it was made in? That particular statue, forget the other statues, for instance, let's talk about this one specifically. Why should that statue be taken away if it was and is to be designed and paid for by former slaves of the time, by freed men? Why is it that should be taken away if we are to remember slavery, if we are to remember the times of change?
Well, I mean, if it's the will of the people.
Sure, no, I agree. I will hold my hands up and say, yeah, if that's the way that the Bostonians want it to happen, then that's cool. And, you know, me over in little old England or anybody else outside of the state or the city, that doesn't really have a say in that type of matter. Maybe you could buy the statue afterwards, as you quite rightly said, and put it somewhere else and hold it up and whatnot, sure. But until that actually happens from the vote, let's talk about the actual idea of taking it down. If we're just taking it down because people are offended by the statue, does that mean that if enough people are offended by any statue, that I can take it down? Or is there the context of the slavery that's involved for taking it down? What are the parameters for taking it down?
Well, I mean, if people don't like something, people take stuff down all the time. I realize this is more of an affixed physical monument as well, but again, it's as far as I can see, if the city council voted on it, if they're within their right to do so and choose it, I mean, I'd rather see a city vote. I would prefer to see the people vote on it, but I mean, if it is the will of the people, and it, again, just based on my experience being a lifelong masshole, I tend to think that this action is likely in line with the course of probably the majority of folks. I could be wrong here. I'm sure there are totally folks against it, absolutely. But at the same time, if we elect representatives to represent us, and as long as they are reflecting the will of the people, I can't judge what's in another person's head nor heart for the reason why they do it. I mean, I could always speculate as well. I mean, at least for Boston and Massachusetts here, again, I ain't a Bostonian, even though I like to say I'd like to go grab my car keys, grab my car keys, throw on my car keys, and then go down and park my car in Harvard Yard. I like to say that, even though you can't park your car in Harvard Yard. It doesn't really bother me. I mean, I'd rather see it taken down via some form of due process than people just trying to like tear its head off. Or I think they saw the head off a Columbus statue for like the third time in the past 15 years. I wasn't at that event, but
I wouldn't assume that you were. But the thing that I'm trying to get at is, fine, if they go down the road of due process and they do it in a calm and simple manner, and it's not done by populism at the minute, and even people that may or may not even live there doing the votes because they're protesters at the moment, then fine, take it down. I have no problem in that. But I want to know the reasoning for it. And I know you can't speak for everybody, and I'm not trying to get you to speak for everyone. I'm just trying to ascertain for myself. If people are saying that they want statues to be remembering, commemorating slavery, as in the point of the freedom of it and moving past it, I don't see how, even with your suggestion of making a statue of Lincoln and the slave being on equal terms, I don't see how that is any more powerful than a statue that has been made, again, in essence, and being more colloquial, but commissioned and sought after and paid for by former slaves and slaves at the time. How that your statue would be more powerful than that statue, because it has more significant meaning about how it was made and why it was made, rather than it being a statue commemorating something that nobody alive today even was a part of or knew what the essence was of the time.
I mean, I'd just say, I mean, anything that would be new, that would be forged, I mean, that'd just be part of the modern 2020 civil rights movement. I mean, that would just be my most basic answer. I mean,
does new always mean better, though?
I can't really speak for anyone else. I mean, that just...
No, I agree. But does new always mean better?
No, not always.
Sure. I mean, the reason why I'm harping on this is because I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm just trying, if there is an audience at some point that watches this, then they can look back and go, well, it's a question that needs to be answered. If this is to be a part of taking down what we think is bad remembrance of slavery and painting black people in a negative light, I personally don't see that a statue that was commissioned and helped designed by freed men that were slaves that were turned into free men is anything more powerful that can ever be created or thought of today. These freed men paid for it themselves, helped design it, and then it was commissioned and made. I don't see how anything today could be more powerful than what that statue is about celebrating the freedom and at the essence of the day, the empowerment and hope that would be envisioned and given to them at that point in time. I don't see anything more powerful myself.
Now, was the statue in Boston paid for by freed folks?
No, it was a copy of the statue that was paid for by this
Right.
by a
The
freedman.
DC one is what I've mostly heard of. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, the marble one. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but the essence is still the same, though, is it not? As in, the essence was that the statue was, in essence, paid for and designed by free slaves. So the design is still done by slaves, regardless. And that still is more powerful than what any statue that could be done by today's standard to remember slavery would ever be done by, surely.
I mean, I've given my opinion and take. I really just I don't.
Okay, yeah, that's fair
I
enough.
don't really have anything else to really contribute past this, so it's.
No, that's fair enough. I am harping on the same point. I do get it. Maybe it's me being a little bit autistic in the side of it, that it's a thing that gets me, because just because that we don't like a certain part of history, and I use that colloquially, not as a directive towards you, for instance, but just because that we don't like the way that history was or is, that we should get rid of monuments simply because we don't like them. For me, I don't really see that, though. I do agree, if it's done by due process and done by in a calm, voted period, then fair enough. That's the way that civilization has decided to move on from. I do get that, and I am with that, and I'm on board with it. I don't like the idea of people deciding why, in the heat of the moment, why they've got everybody on their side because they're scared of backlash, of falling to mob rule. I don't see that as anything indicative of any form of democracy.
Yeah, no, and again, that's the general point that I probably should have just acknowledged. It's just it does seem that some folks are doing things out of what may likely be fear rather than it necessarily being the right thing to do, and that in and of itself is a problem, regardless of whoever is inciting that fear or be causing an individual to feel fearful. But
Agreed.
CSG, my battery's almost at its limit. Anything else you want to do before we wrap up?
No, that's absolutely fine, my friend. If you wanted to do your last little bit of shilling, just in case your battery dies before anything else, you carry on, sir, and I'll finish off.
Rightio. But hey, folks, this is the Memes of Destruction here. You can find me on these YouTubes here at the Memes of Destruction, as well as on the Twitters at Meme Destruction, as well as various other things where it's in my own little linky doobly doo if you click on the about thingamajigger. We're also starting Project Newsquetch, which is basically going to be a site and hopefully soon to be application available to help aggregate different raw video about events brought to us from viewers like you. If you happen to be on the community, if you happen to see something that's newsworthy, submit it to us. Basically, we're attempting to unleash the full power of citizen journalism, because if somebody happens to have a camera or a phone or something like this right here, you have the ability to document events. It's like, okay, well, so all of a sudden the 15-second clip goes viral. It's like, oh, it kind of puts a meme out there in people's minds about what happened. Now, is that the actual point that should be stressed? What happened before that? What happened after that? Context matters. And this is what we're trying to do, to not necessarily just go out there and debunk people, but also incentivize people to help go out there. We're going to have a quest-based system coming up soon, where it's basically like, if people are willing to toss 50 or $100 to somebody for a super chat to read it, well, if somebody wants some personalized coverage from an event to try to get them some info, maybe a couple interviews on the ground, I'm pretty sure people would willing to invest money in that. And you know what? If you're in the area and you want to get into some journalistic endeavors, ain't nothing wrong with getting paid for good work. So that's what we're trying to accomplish there, as well as brush off vanity and show some reality. But thank you for the little shell spot, CSG. I really appreciate it, man.
No, that's absolutely fine. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the conversations. To be honest, I don't really have too much to say. I think Memes of Destruction has said everything that I wanted to say, or anything I wanted to do about the News Quest. I think it's an amazing opportunity for everybody that wants to get involved in getting the bias out of media, that this is your chance to take a stand. This is your chance to do what you think is right, to make sure that you get the truth out there. Because if everybody's going to go on the idea of their truth is the truth, then let's get as many truths as possible out there, shall we? At least that way people can have a look and then decide for themselves rather than it being narrated to them. Just an idea, right? What can go wrong with an idea?
And well, apparently not nowadays. But my big thing is I just want people to think.
I completely not agree. I think conversations in general like this, and my opinions pieces like this, once decided as being described as them being opinion pieces, it brings more people into understanding that mine and memes' opinions are vastly different on vastly different subjects. But at the same time, we can come together, we can work together, we can try and ascertain what the truth is. Because if I stick to people that are on my side, I'm only going to get confirmation bias from that, and vice versa for memes. But if we come together and collaborate, we can butt our heads together and create something that will work for everybody, rather than it being one side wins compared to the other side loses. Let's work together for a change, eh?
I know. And what we know from physics as well as anime is that fission is a powerful force. But what's more powerful than fission is fusion. Ha! Ah! Wrong one.
And with that, I'm now leaving.